Thank you very much for joining today for this panel, which is called So You Want to Be a Founder? And Brian McHenry is going to be the moderator for the panel, and we'll just kick it off there. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. I'm very honored to have four guys who have got founding experience and startup experience who are willing to share, and count them all among my close network of friends and colleagues. Very appreciative of all. First of all, I want to thank you all for traveling here, for supporting the event. The only thing I founded personally is the co-founder of B-Sides NYC. So that's my founding experience. But I do have some experience. I worked at F5 about 16 years, and my last 6 years there, I spent a lot of time in our corporate development team looking at startups as acquisition targets. I've got a little bit of the other side of the fence view on things that I'll try to inject into the conversation. But without further ado, I'm going to just go across my left to the right, your right to left, and have these fine gentlemen introduce themselves. And so I'll start back.
He actually knows that Justin Shattuck, I'm the CSO of a cyber insurance company called Resilience. The greatest part of it is we're not allowed to sell anything directly to people. So therefore I've never had a sales pitch to sneak into anything. It's all just real opinions and views. I was at F5 as well for a while. And in 2018, I had a threat intelligence company, Lorica, that I built. I feel like that's why I'm here in terms of founded something, and then it got acquired, but much more modest in terms of we bootstrapped. So no secret IPO sauce information coming from me.
Very good.
Wesley Hales from Leak Signal.
Hey everybody. Yeah, so been in the industry about 20 years, roughly as a software engineer, the first 10 years, and then cyber started in 2014. I went to a startup in Mountain View, California, moved out there, and it's called Shape Security. And we started the bot protection space, and I really started to learn what a startup was like when I moved to Silicon Valley and lived that life, and went on from there and tried to thrive and grow as an early software engineer, later in sales, and then Shape was acquired by F5, and that's where I met Brian in 2020, right before COVID hit, acquired for $1 billion. I did not make anywhere near life-changing money. The founders did, though, and the executive team, but I saw a glimpse of it. I saw a glimpse of a successful startup. I also worked for other startups that were funded by A16Z and others that imploded and did terrible, right? So there's many startups fail. I've been part of many failures, been a part of one big success. Here to tell that story, I started Leak Signal in 2022 with a group of co-founders. We'll talk more about that, but glad to be here. Thank you.
And to my right, your left, is JD from InPart Security.
Yeah, so my name is Jonathan DiVincenzo. I tend to go just by JD. I was a software engineer for about a decade for a small company called Resource that no one's ever heard of. But it was bought by IBM a long time ago, and that kind of started my journey upon what do I want to do? So I went to another startup named Edgecast that ended up getting bought by Verizon for a lot of money, and I started to see, hey, this actually is a pretty lucrative career here. So I went to another startup that was called Signal Sciences. It was a next-gen WAF, and we were bought by Fastly just about 4 years ago. And after being there for about a year, I left and started InPart Security, based in San Francisco, California.
And last, but certainly not least, Lee Weiner.
Hi everybody, thanks. I'm Lee Weiner. I'm the CEO of a startup called Troge AI. I started my career in cybersecurity in 1998 at a identity management software company. I got there, I think we were doing about 3 million in sales when I got there, and I was a sales engineer. Wound up in that role accidentally. And then we got acquired by Computer Associates. And then I went to a little company called IamLogic. I lived here in New York City then, and I was still a sales engineer. We got acquired by Symantec. Francis D'Souza ran that company. I don't know if people know Francis, but he's a pretty amazing guy. One of my lessons is find really good people to just be around. And then they were all home runs. So I figured they were all gonna be home runs. And I went to a really big failure. I will not, you can just look at my profile, but it's a database security company that just didn't work. But great experience. And then the last 11 years before here, I was at Rapid7. I ran product engineering kind of stuff, a lot of M&A. I have actually never been a founder, but the company I'm at is quite early. So I'm in the sort of founding dynamic, I would say.
Thanks, guys. I got a few seed questions, of course, that I'm gonna ask the esteemed panel here, but we are gonna try to leave as much time for questions as possible because this is really about your curiosity and picking the brains of these experienced individuals. So Justin doesn't feel like I'm picking on him. I'm going to start with Lee this time with the first question. And what is the funniest, weirdest, or most shocking thing that has happened to you in the course of being involved with startups or as a founder?
Yeah, so I'd say that this is probably, I don't know, I might be getting too real too quick, but because it's not that funny, is I think the big shock for me has been, and it's been like a gradual thing. It's not like, oh, this happened to me. It's just more of how I've thought about it, is that you all have hopefully, you all have amazing ideas. And they're fantastic. We need more startups, so I hope you all have them. I know some people would say oh no, we don't. This market's overcapitalized. Well, clearly we haven't solved the problem. So it's not actually overcapitalized yet, but we need more people to come up with these great ideas. So you have a great idea and you want to build something, or you have a service or something you want to get off the ground. And so it's awesome. You start formulating that, you come up with maybe some plans, maybe you start building something. Then you get a few other people involved. Maybe they're your friends. Maybe you hire somebody, right? And then hopefully you get a customer or someone to get engaged. The thing that is kind of shocking through all of this is that you really start to feel the weight of all of that on your shoulders in a massive way that you would have never thought. You can't describe this, all of you know this, but there's this thing that happens, which is you're now responsible for your baby, right, that you're creating, your customers that are maybe using this thing, and then maybe you have some employees that you're actually paying them. So that to me has been it's hard to explain, and you would all say well, of course that happens, but that weight, I'll leave here and I'll go walk around New York City and you'll feel that weight all of the time. And it is wonderful, but it is also you just have to really think about that.
And payroll isn't always easy.
Right. You know what I mean, JD.
Absolutely.
JD?
Yeah. So for me, when you're founding a company, especially when it's venture backed, we're not bootstrap. Bootstrap is a whole different ball game. And so a lot of respect for those guys, but we're venture backed, which means that we go and ask people with a lot of money for a lot of money. And so, but what happens is you're either doing something interesting that they care about, or you're not. There's really not anything in between. And as a CEO or founder, you have to manufacture that interest somehow. So you will meet someone that you're pouring your heart into. This is what we want to do. We're going to take over the world. And they literally aren't even looking at you and not paying attention. And you're well, this isn't working. You'll go to the next person and they'll think it's cool. Then the person you just spoke to heard that it was cool. And now all of a sudden they're hey, nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. We want to invest. And I'm I just talked to you 2 days ago and you don't even remember who I am. So it's a very odd environment. And I think that was one of the things that kind of stood out to me the most is when you're raising money, you have to manufacture interest in what you're doing with the investors that you're talking to. And that's a huge part of it. And really, it's completely on the shoulders of the CEO and the founding staff to do that. And you'll have a lot of weird interactions because if you're not doing anything that they care about, they may not remember you. But then eventually you have enough conversations and then other people start hearing about what you're doing. And then all of a sudden they're interested again. But some of them may not even remember that they even talked to you. And so you're this is the third time I've actually met you. And now all of a sudden they want to give you $5 million. So it's kind of strange. Yeah.
Maybe not take things personally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you definitely can't take things
super
personally.
thick skin. If you get a no, you just kind of wipe it off and move on. You can't wallow. You'll stay there under that weight.
Under that weight,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, I think agreeing with what these guys said is the weight is real. The amount of rejections that you get, you need to be prepared for. You have a vision and you have a unique idea and you want to bring that to the world. Most people will tell you that you're stupid, or not stupid, but that your idea is stupid, or you get a lot of rejection. And I think being prepared for that mentally and physically and being ready to weather that storm, people talk about it, you'll hear Elon Musk and others talk about chewing glass and staring into the abyss is kind of what it's like to be a founder. It's something that you must be prepared for. And you don't know it until you go through it. So again, I say be prepared for it, but also going through the process, you'll learn, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not something to be intimidated by, but it is something that is very real and part of the founding journey. So
I feel I can add in terms of flavors along the way. For me personally, I've always been, become an engineer career-wise for the vast majority of my career. It's also why going first is always the worst, is you actually now get to hear the pattern of what everybody else said, and and find the best way to fit it in versus being the one to lead it off, because I can just ramble very well. But in terms of, it takes a lot of confidence. And I go up, confidence like ebbs and flows. It can be very exhausting to like produce confidence when you don't have confidence. And I think it's easy to like look at startups and look at the news. You see companies raising rounds and having great success in their fundraising, and to think about what it is that they're doing to achieve that. And so much of it is confidence. And I remember early on thinking that, man, everybody has so much more confidence than I do. How is this going to work? And the biggest shock, or the lesson, and it resonates in so many other ways, is many of them are just faking it, right? They just fake it until you make it. And I mean that really, like, if you can be good at that, like be confident in your ability to sell the vision, sell the idea. I just always found it easier to sell to the customer first before I ever tried to sell anybody that was like a good idea, in terms of like, it's just the way that I solve problems as well. I love problems and challenges. That's what attracts me to a company, is what are they trying to do, like what problems, versus the solution that's been decided upon. Yeah, it can be very.
It's also about rewarding, right? So this is a classic question that I think we probably all answered at one point or another. Is one piece of advice you wish you had when you first leapt into the fray of being a founder? And JD, we'll start with you.
So I worked for a guy that was like wildly successful in starting businesses. And if you go on his LinkedIn, he pretty much will just say, if you want to start a business, don't. Right? And like, that's odd, but it's like, you really have to want to do it. Like, there is no like, maybe I'll go start a business. These people made a lot of money, right? So I can do that too. And you have the skill set, but you just have to want to do it. And so I would say just the piece of advice is like, you're basically going to be putting parts of your life on hold for 5 to 7 to 10 years. And you have to be okay with that, and just know that going into it. And be like, it's worth it, right? The rewards can be huge. You're building a company, you're providing awesome jobs to awesome people, building a culture. There's a lot of wonderful things that can come out of it. But like, if you really are not like, this is what I want to do for the next 5, 10 plus years, then you're probably better off just not doing it. And then I would also say that like, if you wanted to start something, like do something awesome for some of these really cool companies in a security org that already exists. That's where you're going to learn the most. That's where you're going to see holes in like security programs, and then go start a business that fills that. So the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, it's not a 9-to-5 job for sure.
Correct.
My ideas about starting a startup ended a long time ago. I wanted to raise my family, and I knew I couldn't devote the time. I actually had one of my team, my current role with Checkpoint Software, he actually resigned and said, I'm 39 years old, Brian. I have this great idea, and if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. Yeah. And he's like, it's nothing on you. You're a great manager. That's not. He's actually said that in comments.
Yeah,
but it's to that point of, hey, there's no time like the present. If you've got the time, avoid the time.
Yeah, I'd say time flies by really fast when you start something. When you jump out on that ledge and you decide to pull the trigger, time goes by really quickly, and you have to be prepared for that. And I think going back to what JD was saying, whatever you want to do, finding the best company that might be in your realm, right, that you can go work for and learn from those individuals is very important. Because going back to my time at Shape, I started out as an individual contributor, engineer, and went over to sales, and then learned how to do sales, and then I went to customer success and learned how to implement the product and how to take care of customers, and jumping around to all those different roles within the company and creating that trust with the founding team was really important for me, because that company itself was funded by Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia and all these great investors that you hear about. Right, so I wanted to get closer to that and understand what that ecosystem was really like. So that helped me. So I guess luck favors the prepared, right? And so the more prepared you are in going into that journey, the better off you're going to be. So I just, one of my recommendations would be to go work, build trust, work with people that are much better than you, much more talented, much smarter than you, and learn from those individuals, and then try to do it, try to go out and do that job.
All amazing points. I don't even know what to. There's so many lessons that I think overall. If I were bubbling it up as like ego, it's like definitely there's not a lot of room for egos. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
In terms of helping others help you identify what are the challenges you're trying to solve for. I mean, any meetings in terms of you observing what are the pains, the challenges that people are describing when they're describing a tool they tested, and it's kind of all around us all the time. There's just opportunities for what people are needing efficiency for, or better performance out of, or kind of whatever you're interested in. Yeah.
Certainly, my experience on the acquiring side of the fence is I always thought about that exact thing. It was like, is this something that I've seen customers of mine, or when I was in IT, like, was I frustrated with this? Was this something that wasn't well solved by the market? And that gave me a really good insight to advise like our chief strategy officer to say, yeah, this is something that's an unsolved problem or a poorly solved problem, and be able to recommend, say, we should take a closer look at company X, Y, or Z because I think they're solving it better.
The one thing I would say is if you want to start a company because you want to make a lot of money, don't start a company. Because there are way more, all of us could get jobs where we make more money than doing something like we're probably all doing. I don't know what these guys make for money, but I bet they can make more money somewhere else. That doesn't mean you won't make a lot of money at some point. It could happen, but it just can't really be the thing that's driving you. I think other people have said this, like, you've got to have a problem you really have to solve. Like, if you don't, you get up at 3 a.m. thinking about it. Well, then maybe you got something, right? It's like that's the thing that I think you've got to do to try to drive yourself to want to do something like this.
I'd add to that, yeah, like really understanding needs versus wants. I think we all probably hear that occasionally, but being able to distill down, are people saying they want something? Or are people describing something, need something to help solve this problem? I think it's a real good way to discern the ideas, in the chat.
A question that I wondered about for a long time before I saw it happen a little bit up close, and I think one of the insights I hope many of you are interested in gaining from this panel is, how the hell do I get funding? Like, how do I get introduced to some angel investor, some venture capital firm, and even demystifying some of the jargon. These guys have mentioned bootstrapping versus venture capital. What does that mean? Insights, I'll start with you, Wes, about how do I get my idea funded?
This is a great question. So I guess, like I was saying earlier, going to work for a startup that already has funding and seeing how that ecosystem works, that's part of the puzzle, right? But going out and jumping and creating that relationship with an investor that is going to trust you enough. And again, I'm always going to go back to trust, right? And someone who's going to give you $1 million or $3 million or however much. I mean, I started out getting a $500,000 check from a VC at a very low valuation, right? And this was to collaborate with a partner at that VC firm on an idea that he and I both collaborated on, okay? And so we started with a seed of an idea, a vision, and said, yes, we believe this can work, right? And so we got the funding, the very basic pre-seed funding to start digging on that idea and building the team. And then you get that initial check, and then there's many more challenges that come in terms of finding your founding team and the people that are smart enough to execute on this vision. So yes, you start there, and then you go get more angel funding, angel pre-seed funding from those that kind of buy into that idea. And it's a journey, right? And it's not easy to do. Like I said earlier, there were many people that said no along the way, but there are those that will say yes, and they say, yes, I think this idea will stick, and this is the right person to execute on that idea. So you also have to be that person that they'll believe in, that you can execute on the idea, on the vision, and take that company to be a legendary startup.
Yeah. Justin, I'm going to ask you to take you mentioned you bootstrap work. What's the difference between bootstrapping and venture or angel investing?
I mean, unintentionally, at least, bootstrapping is when you have an idea of something you're working on, maybe it's just for a small niche, and then somebody wants to pay you for that. That's not what I would describe bootstrapping as, but that's how I kind of fell into it. So I had something that I've been building for a very long time that served as a way for me to collect data that then supplemented everything else that I would always do when it came to cybersecurity. So I had my think your own data. Subsequently though, I mean, really it's bootstrapping, not accepting funding, you're building it yourself, you're definitely making your cash go as far as you can. Greg's, I think, from Polestar did a wonderful breakdown today, or a talk that if anybody had the opportunity to attend it, it was wonderful. And it all resonates so much. The things that are on your mind, much so if you're paying employees, like it affects your decisions when you think about we're going to spend money on one tool versus another. That's paychecks, that's lives, if they have families. There's just a lot of, you just don't consider it when you're getting a paycheck yourself working for another organization. But for us, it was essentially keeping, I was just describing the Lorica side as to, we didn't ever have we didn't do any marketing, there were no ads. We looked to our best customers to effectively become like very strategic partners for us. And so it was all done through like OEMs and integrations versus actually having to come up with something that could be customer facing. And using the money that we were getting, you're getting the money in advance, but now you have to produce these features, you have to answer the mail, so to speak. And then going back to the lessons, that's where I truly learned that it's fun, or as I say, it's fun. It's interesting to be an engineer or an engineering manager or leadership and know that we say the words like or perfection is the enemy of good, right? Keep it simple. It really applies to everything. It's the lipstick on the pig approach. You can sell something that isn't built yet, right? You can get customers for an idea as long as you're transparent, as long as everybody's honest with each other as to how long is it going to take, what are you going to do if there's failure involved. People will pay you to help them solve a problem that they truly have, and you can kind of go from there.
I'm gonna shift to maybe just pepper in a little bit the difference between angel investing and venture capital.
Venture capital, yeah. Yeah, so just a little bit on fundraising too, because this has come up before, is I think if you're thinking about being a founder and you're not a founder yet, maybe you have an idea, but maybe you don't have an idea yet, but you think at some point you might, I totally agree, like go find like a 25-person startup and work there, because then you can observe, like you'll be there early enough that you might get involved with fundraising, or at least you'll like be able to ask a lot of questions about it. You might even get to meet an investor. That would make sense. Yeah, so angel investing or angel fundraising is when you just take your first like small sum of money to get started, right? And maybe you get that through, there's angel networks around. You could probably all like use your network and find one. There's quite a few. There's a really great one in Silicon Valley, but there's a lot of them. And they'll be a little more, they're much more willing to take massive risk on really just an idea, knowing you don't have anything real built yet. But you have an idea, you probably have a vision, you may have like a little bit of a prototype thing, but you don't have much more than you and maybe a co-founder, and you get your first set of kind of angel money. And if you get the right advisory group in your angel investors, I mean, they can make a huge difference for you, right? So like, JD, I think, has a good experience with this because the Signal Sciences crew, there's a bunch of angel investors there, and they'll connect you with all kinds of people. So they can be really influential, and they can transform the kind of that early stage to something much bigger. So I would,
You get the feedback.
yeah, you get feedback because they're usually people that are in the industry. Like these people on this panel at some point will probably be angel investors. They may already be, right? So like they'll give you, because they know people and they might know CISOs, and they might be able to get you connected to get you feedback. So angel investing can be like those first investors can, I don't want to say they could break your company, but they could make it. They could definitely make it, for sure.
As far as 25-person startups, don't be surprised that a lot of the tables of vendors.
Yeah. I have one
B-Sides
myself, yeah.
Are of that ilk.
Yeah.
If you're looking for career opportunities here at B-Sides NYC today, go and check out the vendors, because they're not here pitching product as much as they are with talent. So there's a bit of both going on, and so there's some opportunities here and other conferences as well that you might go to. That's a great way to get introduced to startups, and because that's my first question if I was out there is, how do I find a 25-person startup with no marketing? It's often at small events like this.
The only other thing I'll say, Brian, just is on the venture side, your first kind of venture round is going to be a little more, first of all, it's much more structured. There's going to be much more rigor in kind of what your idea is, who the founding team is, and what your vision is for the market. There'll be a need to have like an actual deck that you've got to present. They, again, can be very, like, there are better venture capitalists than others. I didn't say there were bad ones. And so, like, I think that first investor, formal VC, is really, you can pick a good one or you can pick a not so good one.
Yeah, and kind of building up what you said a while ago about making money. If you do go look for like a Series A or Series B company, which is like a company that has shown like the ability to grow some, they have a product and people are paying for it, but they're still small. Like if you go work there, you'll get experience with working at a startup, and then hopefully there's an exit in there in the next couple of years. And those founders, ask them, just tell them, be like, hey, like I worked for you for the last 5 years. We just sold the company. can you like introduce me to a VC? And 9 times out of 10, they're gonna hook you up with a VC and probably even give you money to get started because they just made a lot. And the investors in their company that you didn't build, you just worked at, but you worked hard at, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, no, this is great. We just made some money. Let's put some money back into some people that like kind of helped make this happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fantastic path to go on, and that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, those leaders or founders or CEOs, like when I was at, I don't think anyone here worked at IamLogic, but like Francis D'Souza he was on the board of Disney. Like I worked with him when we had a little 60-person company that we sold to Symantec. I can call Francis D'Souza and ask him for advice. I mean, which to me is kind of crazy. If you went and looked at his background, like just lowly old me, like that, and he probably would help me raise some money if I needed to.
I don't want to go into like story time, but I think I've definitely been on that side of the room far. You guys felt like this side of the speaking out is, I don't know, I'm terrible at talking sometimes, but it's not just like things that are being said of like, you did all, after I sold that, in terms of getting, what am I going to do next kind of thing. And for me, it was, we're talking about these in terms of the lessons. That became the criteria for me in making where am I going to go. And when I learned of it, it wasn't called resilience at the time. It was called Arceo. And I learned about it through a previous colleague. This is the guy I shared. It's like, keep going, okay. Mike Corventino, who was the CISO at F5 at the time, we had a good working relationship. And by understanding these problem sets that this company Arceo has, it's like, wow, the problems, the challenges sound great. Like, that's really interesting. And then I go and I look, in terms of looking at the executive team, like, where's the vision coming from? What are they actually trying to accomplish? Am I going to learn? And that's really what brought me there, is so that I could, and fortunately, we'd, I guess, be a successful startup. We're doing well, but it's, for me personally, it's just more about all of the additional lessons I can learn through all of our activities. It can be very valuable.
So one lesson I'd love to hear a little more about. You found an investor. You crossed that hurdle. You found a potential investor. How do you know if it's the right one? And maybe I'll start with you, Justin.
I'll say, because I've always said no. It's not that I've not talked to investors or been, you know what I mean? It's if you have something that's working, sometimes the investors will come to you looking as well. But I'd say one of the big things that I think it's easy to forget about is how are they going to handle failure as well, what's happened in the past. Make sure that they're a good fit. I mean, they're a long-term partner, so you're allowed to ask them questions too. I think if you not literally get them to pitch you, but think of it in that way. It's going to be a partnership. There's a lot of skin in the game with investment as well, and so there's resources available to you. And then likewise, understanding what's their mode of operation. Are they going to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning? Just understanding how they operate, how they work, very helpful.
Yeah, speaking of that a little bit, investors like it when you challenge them in terms of not in a negative way, but more of how do your funds work? Can you cross over from your seed fund to your later funds, or how much dry powder do you have left, right? And understanding their funds and
Define dry powder.
dry powder. How much money do you have to invest in not only my startup but in others, right? Understanding the health of their firm, I think is really good. So having 1 or 2 questions to ask them that show, hey, I'm a founder, I know what I'm talking about when I talk to you, Mr. Investor, or Miss Investor, and here are my list of questions for you. I think it levels you up a bit and brings some respect to the game from that front. But what was your original question?
Oh, you got it.
How to find an investor that fits with you.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I aligned myself with an investor that I knew I wanted to invest in the very beginning. But then later, as we raised more money from other investors, like I was saying earlier, there was a lot of rejection, right? Probably my 13-year-old daughter is here in the room right now, and she knows some of the pain that I've been through on that front. So it really isn't finding, for me, it wasn't finding the right investor. It was those who believed in the vision and the idea that we were going for, and those investors popped through all the rejections, right? So from what I was doing, and it may be different for the others here.
Yeah, sometimes you may not have a choice.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
you're
hopefully
lucky
you
if
do.
there's a choice.
Yeah, or
Yes,
You're lucky
hopefully
if
we
there's a
choice.
choice. Like, I don't know what the odds are of getting funded. Let's say 1 out of 20? I don't know, is that good or bad?
1 out of 50.
1 out of 50? So like 1 out of 50 may get a single offer, right? So like you may not have any choice in the matter. And then it becomes like, okay, do I still want to do this with the one person that's willing to take the risk? And they might have a lot of requirements, right? They might want to sit on your board. They might want quarterly reporting, all this stuff that you're like, I've never done this before, so I don't know how to do any of this stuff. So it's always better when you have options. And if you have options, you typically look at their backgrounds and like, what have they invested in? Have they invested in the company that, or that you like, you know, have any connection with? And if so, that's probably going to be a pretty good fit. Like if they invested in like Walmart and you're trying to build cybersecurity, you know, there's a very different thing there, right? So, I mean, obviously very successful, but like they may not know what it's like to start like a 2-person cybersecurity company. So typically you want to find something that's in your realm. And hopefully, God willing, you'll actually have more than one option when it comes to it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think the cybersecurity community is super collaborative, actually. Even though like a lot of us compete with each other, there's a lot of collaboration. I mean, there's actually a Slack group for security founders and CEOs that a bunch of us are in. And so if you can like engage with other people that are doing this, you can just ask them for advice. Like, hey, I mean, I literally just asked JD who he's thinking about raising money from, right? Because at some point we'll need to raise more money. And so it's just good to hear about like, well, why did you choose that person? How are they working with you? What are their expectations? How aligned are they to your future? And so I think just talking to other people that are doing this is a big part of the job, actually. Like you'll learn a lot from it.
Yeah, and a lot of times like the market is going to dictate the winners, right? Like market and kind of timing, maybe some other differentiation, but like most folks are actually super friendly in cybersecurity as far as like helping one another out, right?
All right, one more question before we get to Q&A for our lovely audience here, and it's nice to see it pretty full. And JD, I'll start with you since you mentioned this in our conversation earlier today. Is what am I looking for in co-founders or day one team members? Like what are those qualities or what are the things that stood out for you in a good co-founder?
So they have to want to do it as badly as you do. If they're like, well, I'm either going to do this or go work for AWS, then like, but may not be like the best fit in the world, right? Even though like probably super technical and can do it, like they just have to want to do it with you, and they understand that like Saturdays and Sundays aren't exactly like weekends anymore, right? Like I always joke and say like, what's a weekend, right? Like,
There's no weekend.
I don't think I've seen one in several years. But like you have to find someone that wants to do that and that they're really in it to win it. And like when we were talking really early on, we were like, look, we want to build like a real company that does really well, that people want to work at, and that people is going to remember their name. And like, do you want to do that? Or are you hoping for like a little bit of like miracle pixie dust where you work for 12 months and someone buys your company for $400 million? Like that's not normal, right? And I'm like, and if that's all that you're looking for, it may not be a good fit because it's going to take a lot of elbow grease.
Yeah, I think when you think about the first people, right, that you want to bring on, I think there's a couple key characteristics. They have to be super comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity and change. And everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, that, of course. But like, you've really got to make sure that's true. And I tend to be someone who hires for experience. So I look at people's backgrounds and I try to test their backgrounds. To JD's point, like if somebody was like at IBM for 6 years, AWS for 8, and then maybe they worked at like, I don't know, some other big company, they're just to call it out, the likelihood of them succeeding at a 5-person startup is like 3%. Because like they don't understand that there is nothing. You have to do everything, create everything. And so really that person can understand like ambiguity, and there's gonna be tons of change, and you've got to really be into that whole thing. That's my take.
I would say from a co-founding perspective, again, people that are smarter than you, right?
Yeah.
You want to find a co-founder who maybe has even been there, done that. If not, they're incredibly bright in whatever it is. It's probably going to be, so you're the sole founder, you're the CEO. Are you technical? Are you sales? Are you both? Right? And then finding an engineer who then can be your co-founder, who works on the core product, right, of whatever you're building. Having that first engineer is very important, and that person needs to be incredibly flexible, like you guys are saying, right? Needs to be resilient and know about the journey that they're about to go on and be ready to commit to that, because like you were saying, you're doing everything. And so also one other thing I would say, that helped me in this journey was creating small projects a lot before I became a founder, right? Standing up a GitHub project, standing up any side project you can, just be good at standing up those small projects, because when you become a founder, you're also going to be doing the same thing, standing up small little things to see if they take in the market, right? To see if you can find traction along with your core vision, right? So just being flexible, being able to create, be creative, and also have that founder also kind of in that same mindset. You can't be someone that's just expecting you to feed them work, right? You're in large corporations, in big companies where we receive work to do from on high, whoever the management team is. In this case, that's going to be flipped. You need to be creative, be able to invent, be able to bring things to the world that others aren't doing, and that's incredibly valuable skill set.
All of that, that would have been the things I would have said, at least one of those. I'll say, like, in terms of like multiple hats, you're gonna wear multiple hats. Everybody's going to wear multiple hats, whether you like hats or not. You gotta be down with hats. And then you learn what are the gaps that you don't really have the capability for, and if you have an opportunity, like finding other people who are as passionate as you, that then they deserve, like, yeah, you want to co-found this thing together, right? You want to. I was in terms of. Yeah, I'll just stop there. Okay.
I think we've all said this, but like resiliency is super important because there's a lot of ups and then there's a lot of downs. And so you've got to be resilient enough to like deal with that. I mean, people have talked about, I think the former or the current CEO of Rapid7 just talked about this, like uncapped optimism is a really important trait if you can find it. If you don't have it, finding someone with it is super valuable. Like, yeah, anyways.
Be quick, because I'll leave enough time for a few questions.
Okay, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, question time. So shout out your question. Feel free, just stand up if you have a question, and I'll restate it so it gets recorded for the audio. Anyone?
So it's good to see some fellow rational masochists. I'm curious if you guys have stories or advice on getting first users. 'Cause that's like,
So the question is stories or advice on getting first users, and let's try to make the answers quick. Anybody got a quick?
I would just say 0 to 1, I thought was the hardest thing we'd ever done. And I thought it was going to be easy because I knew so many people, and I thought I would be able to be like, hey, Brian, like here, like give me $10 and you can become my first user. And that just did not happen, right? So it's a lot of trial and error, making sure that your value, like that you're building in your product, meets something. A lot of LinkedIn messages, sometimes even cold call messages, revisiting every person you ever knew in your life, in your co-founder's life, right? And getting that messaging down for someone to be like, oh, that sounds interesting. But I thought it was super hard, like probably the way harder.
I think one thing that tends to happen is if you can craft an ideal customer profile that you think you've built a solution for, it's really hard to stick to that ideal customer profile. Like if you could do it, because what tends to happen is you ask Brian, you're like, hey Brian, but Brian is not our ideal customer profile, but we're gonna get him to do it anyways. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but now we're going over here. And maybe it's okay. Like it could work, but a lot of times it doesn't. You see a lot of these startups where it's like their first 10 customers are their venture capital's portfolio companies. And it's like, if that's what they're building for, amazing. But if they're not, like, what are we doing? So that's a little trick on that whole thing.
Yeah, just to add a couple of things here. It's a layered approach, right? The first thing we started with were friends that we had worked with, other folks that I had worked with, just getting validation, saying, hey, do you think this will fly, right? And so a lot of those meetings, a lot of those Zoom calls, and then cold outreach as well. We are all cold outreach from Lead Signal's perspective, and we went straight into large enterprise and finding that first person that says, oh, we had this on our product roadmap, we were going to build this internally, like that is magic, right? When you hear someone at a large enterprise or whoever your ICP, ideal customer profile is, when you hear them say, oh, we have this pain, right? So when you start having conversations like that, it leads into customer related conversations and sales related. So do you have budget for this, right? Who would be the buyer? So then understanding the sales side of things is really important. But yeah, and then even then when they say they want it may be a year, it may be 2 years before they actually make the purchase. So it's a long journey, but definitely cold outreach does work.
Yeah.
just get it out there. I mean,
Yeah.
make it free if you have to, so you get the first user to get the cycle of feedback going.
Question in front.
Let's say you have a small project, like the kind of piggybacking off his question, how do you get first users, how do you get it out there? Like what are the sources that you like the most, like a website or a forum to just get eyes on it and hit users?
So how do you get eyes on a small project?
Eyes on a project.
What mediums, what formats? Like
Oh,
what-
No, like,
I mean, spend my time looking at vendors all day, kind of every day, from a capability standpoint. Is are people out there solving the problems that we have that we're looking to solve for? And I'll tell you how I look at things in terms of finding, and is even GitHub have a well tagged, well search string README file so that people will find your project. I think that's, especially if you're using GitHub, that's the earliest place you can start doing it. Don't just do the commit the empty README file. Like, put information there so it can be found.
Yeah, treat your project as a product and get it out on GitHub, go into the Slack channel where people would care, right? Because if it's cloud data or CNCF related, right, or something that's related to these different groups that already have Slack channels, you go in those Slack channels, you be transparent and say, hey, I'm just floating this project, right? Would love feedback, and then that's how you can get it out. Is find the communities, find where the communities are circling and potential users would be, and then just be open and honest. Be like, hey, I'm starting this project. I love feedback, and then you'll get feedback. People are usually supportive of that. So yeah.
Guys, anything to add over here?
I think you're at B-Sides, you should tell people about it. Like literally, like go to the drinks thing and talk to people.
Yeah, there's some like LinkedIn influencers that are here and I've seen, right? And I know that they review like software. So like getting in front of them, a lot of them will look at it just because they want to. And then you never know, it might show up in like a blog that they write. And then all of a sudden people are asking you about it.
Yeah, you got a number of entrepreneur authors here on the entrepreneur track, or Ross is here, Elton.
That's what I was referring to. I just didn't want to get him bombarded with people.
Yeah,
But yeah.
but Ross Heller,
Yeah.
I can't pronounce Ross H's last name.
Yeah,
But
Ross H.
There
There you go.
we go.
Yeah.
And Eldon's over here. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed his talk earlier. So there's folks that have written books about
Yeah.
entrepreneurship and startups, and certainly can help connect you. And just talk about your project with pride, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
More questions?
That was going to lead to my question. Like, what I have two, but the main one was what resources have most been because most helpful in launching the business. And my other question is, I'm a recent graduate. Do you guys know if anyone's looking for a recent graduate?
Yeah, well, there's definitely people looking for recent graduates on the vendor floor up there, so be on it, open and upfront and say, hey, I'm looking for work, don't be shy. What resources would you guys recommend as far as figuring out how to do this stuff?
I mean, there's a lot of books you can read. I would say probably one of my favorites was The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I would read that book. I've read that book like 5 or 6 times probably.
Yeah.
It's more enterprise software centric, but it's quite good. But there's a ton of good books. I'm sure these guys.
Yeah, there's a ton of books. There's like a science and an art to like starting a company, right? And like the science side you're gonna read about in books or go to like Columbia Business School, whatever, and they'll teach you all that stuff. Unfortunately, that's just not enough. Like you can check all the boxes and it still doesn't work. So there's kind of like the art side is just what you get through experience and trying and figuring out yourself or learning from bosses.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what you told me earlier is that you took business classes, learned how to write a 50-page business plan, and then never used it and started.
Yeah, like
No.
like
No, I
seed
didn't-
investor
no.
wants to read a 50-page business plan. Like you might get them to like slide 3 in like a deck that has 80-point font, right? Like so you-
words or less.
yeah, you'll get like 10 words if you're lucky. So like this giant thing that you might learn like in business school that I did, like they're not going to look at that, right?
Yeah, I would say hard thing about hard things in preparation in the years before you start something, right? You start preparing now. You start putting yourself in the mindset of you are going to be a founder of something, right? And then that will lead you. One book will lead. Somebody will say, "Hey, read these top 10 books if you're a startup founder." Right? There's a ton of that on LinkedIn. But again, like JD was saying, experience is gonna getting that first job and then just being a sponge. And be willing to do any job, no ego involved, right? You are there to serve, and you will do whatever it takes to help that company out. And you're gonna create trust and relationships from that, and that will propel you.
There's just no real one way of doing it. There's so many ways, and so there's lots of books, there's lots of areas that can be helpful, and using them as reference as such, but there's no one way, for sure.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is, couldn't be 5 more regular guys. Like, there's no, and I'm not saying this to insult, there's no geniuses up here of
No,
of some
not at all.
special caliber. There's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of, let's just say yes to anything. So I wasn't in a startup, but I got to F5 when there were like 900 employees, and there were 9,000 when I left.
Yeah.
And all I did during that growth of the company was say yes to anything and raise my hand when I saw something that wasn't, quite working right. It supercharged my career. So even if you're not thinking about founding and just want to have a successful career, say yes to things and dive in, even if you don't know what you're doing.
I was thinking about starting a startup, I have the idea, I have the concept, but I just still trying to find a career between that and trying to just grab anything. Still in that stage.
Nice.
I would say don't be worried about NDAs and
Yes.
being secretive about your ideas. Just go.
Yeah.
Just go. Get feedback immediately as much as you can. Get told no. Get say, hey, you should do this. You should do that. You want that feedback. Like that's gonna help you grow.
Yeah, we got 3 minutes, so we're going to try to get as many questions. Lightning round.
I just want to know what was one mistake y'all made through the whole thing that you wish you did not make?
One mistake will go from B on down 30 seconds or less.
Someone else needs to start. I have plenty of them. I have so many of them that I.
To think that all problems are worth solving, you might get to a point where you get to pick which problems you're gonna solve, that maybe you have to be future-proof. You definitely have to be able to say no. It's just as much as you say yes in the beginning, learn how to say no as well.
I just say like hiring too fast, right? Sometimes it's really easy to be like,
Oh, yeah,
I need
yeah.
a VP of marketing, right? And it's like you probably don't, right? Yet until like things are really jamming. And so you're just kind of like wasting money, and then you're like, why did we do that?
Yeah, I'll take the flip side of that, which isn't going to sound great to everyone, but firing too slow.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, like it's usually what happens is like you know that this isn't working, and you wait a while, and then when it happens, you're like, and both of you might be like, we should have done this 3 months ago. Like,
And with the person, when you hire someone and you're early, let them know. Say, hey, this may or may not work out, bro,
Yep.
or whoever it is, right?
Yeah.
They need to come into this. We're trying to hit this goal in this amount of months, and when we get there, we're going to have a different conversation if we're not there. Right? And just be open and transparent about it the whole time. I think the one thing that I wish I had done differently was be more prepared in the initial pitch to the investors. And part of it's a learning process, but I don't know if I could have been more. I probably could have, but I would say that being more refined and having that pitch more. Well,
We have 1 minute and one question. Then we
How do you find a project to build your business around, and how do you find problems that a lot of organizations are struggling with, and meet solutions so that you're not just another startup?
So how do you find that differentiated project and problem to solve?
go ahead, JD.
I would just say that's where it comes in, where like I worked with like a small company, right? I worked with a small company, worked really hard to make that company successful and solve things that like they weren't really solving, that were problems that I was having, right? And then was like, hey, I'm gonna make this successful. Cool, it was. Now I want to go and solve like this thing that I just like figured out. So I do think starting with like a smaller company is a great way to get ideas.
there's no straight line.
Go ahead.
The floor is lava the whole time. Right? You're jumping different places, you're getting that feedback, you're learning. You want that initial vision, right? Of this is what I think I want to do, but you have to be willing to take the feedback and adjust.
You need some experience, to JD's point, that you saw something that wasn't solved. It's rare that doesn't happen. We could even look at like when Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook, it was because at Harvard he wanted an index of people. Like that's he had a problem he was trying to solve. Now it's not that anymore. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but it's much different.
Can we sneak one more question? You went already, so was there another question?
Back there.
Yeah, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, you said. So I came a little bit late, so if you guys talked about this, I'm gonna shut up, I'll follow up with you after, but you have your idea, you have your concept, you know what you're trying to target. How do you find your initial tech stack? And is a red flag that what you're looking for doesn't necessarily exist from like a IAS standpoint?
How do you find your initial tech stack? I guess was really the question there. And
The fastest way that solves the problem.
Yeah. It kind of.
Like,
Are there any like research tools you're going for? Are you talking to your investor partners?
no. I don't think no investor is going to really care about the actual tools that you're using. Maybe
some
AI,
do,
but
yeah. It's tough to say. It's easy for that glimmer of really advanced technology to think that's going to catch investors' eyes, but really don't start with the tech first. Start with the business problem.
Yeah. The problem that you're solving is more important. Yeah.
All right, that's all we have time for. I think we can all sit here and ask questions.